I think today one of the most complex sensory environments are our bodies. I mean, for lack of a better way of saying
Absolutely,
it,
yeah.
who knew that we would be the largest walking hard drives on Earth? Like, the amount of data that's being generated from humans is actually quantified to be 10 times all business data. And 45% of that's radiology. But we are generating more data than just about anything out there. And so it's fascinating.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmidt, also known as Mr. IoT. Welcome to Coffee Chat with Mr. IoT. Today, my guest is Higinio Maycotte, or also known as HO. How did I do on your name?
You did great.
I'm going to stick with HO. Is that okay?
That's fine. I'm Higinio the seventh, but luckily I had 2 daughters, so I didn't get to pass it on.
Higinio the seventh. Oh, okay.
Yes.
You're the CEO of Molecula. So Molecula. What is Molecula?
So Molecula is a company that's focused on what we call streaming AI. We like to power what we call real-time intelligent applications. If you think about the problem today, we still really can't cope with the data that we're generating. According to Oracle, only 1% of data is being analyzed. And IDC backs that up further and says only 20% of data is even analyzable. So we're in business today to make 100% of the data available to the machines, because we believe that in the next 10 years, machines will make 4 out of 5 decisions for us. And we certainly don't want the machines making decisions on a small amount of the data. We want them making decisions on all of the data. So we're really focused on making sure machines have everything they need to make decisions for us.
Okay, I gotta rewind. There was like so much information in this. I just want to make sure I capture it. So Oracle says only 1% of the data gets analyzed today.
Yes, exactly.
And that's Oracle, right? Where we talk about relational databases mostly, right?
Yes. A lot of data warehouses, data lakes.
Take this to big data stuff, even probably less.
Right.
IDC says only 20% of the data can be even analyzed.
Yes,
Is that right? What
exactly.
You said? And you said 4 out of 5 decisions in the future are going to be made by machines.
Yes. So today, humans are making 5 out of 6 decisions approximately. This is another IDC statistic, but we're slowly going to let those decisions go to the machines, and eventually, I think they'll make them all. But that's when we're done as humans.
And so Molecula will get us more data. So you want to move the needle on the 20%?
Yes.
To, I don't know, do you have a goal?
Exactly. I mean, we want to be sort of the data supply chain into any machine-led decision. So that's sort of what we're focused on. And
data supply chain, okay.
And I think today, those statistics I gave you are pretty daunting. If you have a data infrastructure, it's really hard to make your data actionable. We, in particular, do not want to go fix the machine-led decisions and the human-led decisions. We're really focused on pulling out those AI and machine learning workloads. They're the ones that can really appreciate all of the data.
So give me some examples of where we generate these massive amounts of data. I mean, I work in the Internet of Things.
Yes, exactly.
So, I love that. I always talk about this idea that today, we think we know, but with sensors we will know, right?
Exactly.
There's sort of like this dichotomy of we had like people who made a living out of interpreting data and being smart about it and having intuition, and now it's like, well, the data says this.
Exactly.
But what are the typical use cases where Molecula really plays well?
So let's start by playing a game. Let's play a game of Would You Rather. So let's say you're unconscious on the way to the hospital and you have a deadly sepsis infection. That paramedic is equipped with an AI Copilot to help make a diagnosis. Would you rather that AI have access to 1 to 20% of your data, per the statistics we talked earlier, or B, would you rather that AI Copilot have access to all data that's ever come out of an ambulance ever, plus all of the data that's streaming out of the sensors in that ambulance at that given point? Those are cardiac monitors. There's a lot of equipment that's streaming that data to help make that decision.
Well, that's a trick question. You just told me I'm about to die.
Exactly.
When I'm
exactly.
about to die, privacy doesn't make any difference anymore to me. Now I want all data, but okay.
Exactly. And so that's a really tough technical problem. And so if you answered B, which I think you just did, your life expectancy just went up. So
I don't need a lifeline for that one, do I?
no. So that's a use case that we work on, is helping detect sepsis en route to the hospital by leveraging all the old data and all the new data in real time. It's massive amounts of information, so you have to be able to query EMR records that go back 10 years and look at outcomes, and then you have to be able to query all the data that's coming out of that ambulance at any given moment. And something like sepsis is a huge problem. So sepsis can kill in as little as 12 hours. And for hospitals and insurance companies, 63% of sepsis cases result in readmissions, and that costs the hospitals and insurance companies a fortune. So great reduction on mortality and great reduction on cost potentially. And so that's what we call a real-time intelligent applications. Other things that we like to work on.
Sorry, can I ask you something on this?
Yes.
Which city do I need to have a sepsis today?
Yeah, the companies that we're working on cover about 40% of the country. So,
Okay. Okay.
So
no K chance.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
And other use cases that are similar that I particularly love that we're working on is, a lot of work is being done in human trafficking on sort of the recovery side. We're working with several companies who are trying to work on the predictive side. So being able to take data and predict when human trafficking is going to happen so that it can be averted before the problem occurs. And so that's
So where does the massive amount of data come from in that case?
So, whether we like it or not, I call them virtual IoT sensors. They are sensors put everywhere. So schools are monitoring traffic. There's more monitoring that's happening to try to detect those things than you would imagine.
Okay.
So it's being able to take those streams of data and process those.
Is some of that data video or?
It's not video yet, but you can imagine that it will be at some point.
And that's because Molecula doesn't do video yet, or because video isn't available, or?
We mostly focus on structured data,
okay.
Whether it's structured data coming out of really large legacy databases or streaming data coming out of sensory arrays, or what we call virtual sensors. I think there are physical IoT sensors, and I think there's the concept of virtual sensors, which is pretty interesting.
Talk a little bit about that. What is a virtual sensor? I spend a lot of time putting real sensors into machines, secondary sensors, and so forth. Often we find that primary sensors don't quite have the time interval, or aren't streaming enough data, or a variety of things. Don't give us the right data. What's a virtual sensor?
Yeah, so a lot of our use cases came out of sort of the marketing and advertising industry. So the technology we built was actually spun out of a data advertising company. And so, if you said a physical sensor, we see no difference as setting a virtual sensor, in an app or in a website, tracking that data, those behaviors. And so that's from a marketing perspective. We have some, I talked about the paramedic Copilot a moment ago. We have some really interesting use cases around Copilots in gaming, for example. So being able to take sort of battlefield data, if you were, and then data about what each given player is doing at any given moment. And so those battlefields and those players are being instrumented with virtual beacons, virtual sensors to stream that data back so they can drive a Copilot that can either help that player, or that player can pool their memory and their data with other players so they can play more effectively against others. So while that's a virtual environment, it's really basically the same thing.
So it's interesting how you come back to this Copilot idea.
Yes.
And when you started talking about 4 out of 5 decisions being made by a machine, I sort of had this first reaction of like, oh, I don't know if I want so many decisions be made by a machine and not you or me or whoever, right? So there was a bit of a human feeling I got. Is this why you call that person a co-pilot rather than a machine? You kind of personalize the machine and give it maybe a face or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think personally I'm really intrigued by the idea of a co-pilot, a machine co-pilot. I think we're seeing the proliferation of assistants everywhere, but assistants don't really keep track of context too well. They don't keep track of memory too well. They're sort of in the moment. But this idea of a co-pilot to me is someone who can help make these decisions. And so while we as humans still have control, we're going to be informed by the machines and informed by the data. But I quickly see see that being the other way around. And this goes to the world of analytics. I can't imagine a report in 5-10 years that's not machine analyzed first, and that doesn't come with a summary and a set of recommendations so that the human maybe can make the final decision. And then ultimately, in some cases, I think that machine will have the authority to make the ultimate decisions. Certainly, there's a lot of my life I'd love to outsource to the machine right now.
What is a part you'd outsource?
I'm sure you can all relate. My calendar. I would love a machine to just manage my day-to-day. It would be amazing.
That's an interesting one. I've always felt, even when I've got to the point when I was luckily I had an assistant, I actually never gave up my calendar. There's something about how closely or how widely I want someone to schedule my stuff for me to actually have effective meetings. So
exactly.
It's interesting.
And in a perfect world, there'll be an AI that can figure that out.
Also, they're smart enough to know my patterns and learn my patterns.
They need
and
to be.
therefore actually accommodate that rather than, okay, got it.
Exactly. And so I imagine everything is going to go down that route.
Very cool, very interesting. So, I don't know, I still struggle with 4 out of 5 decisions, but let's say we have copilots, we personalize it, and I think there's going to be a change. How far away, by the way, do you think are we?
I think it's starting to happen now. I think the single biggest technology advance that we're all sort of seeing happen in front of us, and this is from an enterprise infrastructure standpoint, are what we call data pipelines. So data pipelines are changing the way we receive data, the way sensors communicate data, store it, and process it. And so I think if you know technologies like Kafka from a company called Confluent, they estimate that 60% of Fortune 500 are already using Kafka in production. And so as these companies reorganize to these data buses, your agility as a company to make decisions and react to that data in real time also becomes, a core competency. So I think it's happening now as we speak. The framework and underlying infrastructure to allow us to let machines make decisions for us is happening as we speak. I saw an interesting conversation yesterday from the head of data, health and human services, and she was saying it can take them 18 to 24 months from the time a piece of data is created to the time they act on that piece of data. And can you imagine that we're making decisions as important as they're making on data that's that old? So I think the framework for us to be able to make these decisions in real time is getting put in place as we speak.
So you said you mostly work with structured data.
Yes.
Let me try to geek out with you here a little
Yes.
bit. I worked a lot with ERP systems. I was a CIO. I had a lot of corporate systems responsible for, and
Yep.
this isn't too long ago, less than 10 years, and I remember I had to really push the team and everybody else around to think about real time. And it wasn't even real time, it was near real time.
Right.
We kind of called it real time,
Right.
but it was near real time. And the problem we ran into is that all the systems we had, mostly in-house, they couldn't give us the data or accept the data in real time.
Yes.
So now, and this is just sort of transactional data. We're not talking here about traffic, or we're not talking about anything, sensor data. So number one, what an impact does the cloud have in all of this? How cloud enabled does a company need to be to really use this? Number two, are we even ready for that kind of data stream?
Yeah, I think those are great questions. I think, to me, one of the things I've found very interesting is how many of our workloads still sit behind the firewall. I think organizationally we assume that so much of it has moved to cloud, and it really hasn't. If I had to predict the way it's going to play out, I think we're going to see infrastructures like Kafka put in, but I think we're going to see the data sit behind the firewall and the analytic workloads, the machine workloads being moved to cloud. So a lot of the work we're doing is sort of building that bridge between behind the firewall and cloud, and you can call that hybrid, you can call it edge, because cloud is now a whole lot more than just cloud. It's many clouds, and it's also where the data is getting created and the operational decisions need to be made. So I think we're going to see all of that blend for it to happen. And then your question is, are we ready? I think I have a 2-letter word that should scare us all a lot, and that's called 5G. I don't think any of our infrastructures are ready for the onslaught of data that's about to get created as 5G comes into play. So we're struggling, as we spoke of at the beginning of the show, 1% of data is being analyzed, only 20% of digital data is analyzable. And we're going to great lengths to do that, by the way. I call them the information era technologies. A lot of the Hadoop and data warehouse and data lake infrastructures are just struggling to keep up.
Exactly.
So as soon as 5G hits, then what? So it's time to sort of think about it in an entirely new way, and that's what we're trying to bring to bear. But again, we're not trying to solve the problems for the humans. We really don't want to get stuck in fighting these information era technologies. So we're focused on trying to pull the workloads out that are going to lead to machine decisions, because we're betting they're eventually all going to be there.
So you talked about edge versus cloud.
Yes.
How much in that ambulance example happens on the edge, and how much happens in the cloud with a Molecula?
A lot of it.
Which one?
A lot, exactly. A lot of them happens at the edge. And so for us, you can call it IoT, you can call it connected devices, you can call it edge. And there's two ways to think about that. One is about the data that's being generated, and the other one is the decisions, the operational decisions that need to be made. And so in most cases today, all of that data is streaming back to a data center. The data's being made in the decisions being made in the data center, and then it's sent back to the edge so that a reaction can happen. You open a valve, you prescribe a medicine, whatever's happening on the edge. And so we're really trying to focus on making that decision at the edge, leaving the data as much as possible in the edge. And it's such a novel concept. We're still flying hard drives off of oil rigs. Very, very, very rudimentary edge use cases. And so I would love to see a world, and we're working hard to see a world where not only is that data being generated on the edge, but that decision can be made without the round trips back to the data center. And our technology is particularly good at doing that in really safe and secure ways as well. So you can imagine circumstances where companies are very sensitive about having that data
Well, you're sending
exposed.
EMR records, right? I mean, medical records, right? So that's pretty sensitive.
Yes.
Doesn't get much more sensitive than that.
Yes, and there's military applications. There's a lot of applications where decisions have to be made out there, and you want to make that decision as well as possible, but you also don't want to risk that data being out there. And so we have a lot of tools that we built to mitigate those problems.
So have you seen, with your sepsis?
Yes.
Sepsis example, have you seen changes in percentages of the numbers you gave before?
All of that is in the works right now, and we're hoping it's going to be pretty significant. We don't have the actual numbers, but and we're working with 3 different groups on the exact same problem. It's really interesting. What a hot topic it is. Opioid crisis is a big one. Sepsis is a big one. They have a huge impact on society right now. I think I saw yesterday you have a 1 in 97 chance of dying from an opioid overdose. And then you have a 1 in 125 chance of dying in a car accident. That's kind of amazing.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
It strikes me that 2 out of the examples you used almost have a political theme to it, right? You talked about human trafficking. You
Yes.
talked about the opioid crisis. How is it to work as a startup in such a political environment? I'm really more interested in the startup side of this
Yes.
rather than getting into the political side.
It's great. I mean, part of being an entrepreneur and being a startup is making sure that you're passionate about what you do, and you've got to have a mission that people are willing to literally die for, to solve. And so as a founder, you always struggle to find mission culture fit. A lot of people talk about product market fit, but I actually think mission culture fit is far more important. So if your team is incredibly impassioned around your mission, you're going to have much more success in my mind. So while our business has a much broader set of clients, those are the use cases we get pretty excited about solving. Outside of those, I would say our 3 core competencies are healthcare in general. So we're very good with bioinformatics data, so genomics, proteomics, chemoproteomics. So that entire field is something that we spend a lot of time in. Connected devices in general. And while it is a data story, I also think it's equally a decision at the edge story. And then lastly, security. So that's where we spend a lot of time. And I will just add to that those are the three use cases that we like to work on. The stories we talked about are the ones I like to tell. And we have an open source version that has 1,600 companies using it. And the use cases that come out of the community are fascinating. So things like computer vision and autonomous driving, but those are not things that we focus on day to day.
Got it. Very interesting. Very fascinating. I have sometimes in my presentations I talk about the human impact of IoT, and you're like a great example of that with your example. So I appreciate that.
Yes, of course.
So I want to close with a location question.
Yes.
We're in Austin.
Yes.
We're at South by Southwest. Why Austin as a startup? Why not the Bay Area? You talk about healthcare. Big companies also in the Bay Area, lots of research there.
Yes. It's a great question, and I definitely, as an entrepreneur, struggle with it a lot. Austin is an amazing city. Everybody's sort of coming here for a lot of different reasons. There's certainly
It's exploded, hasn't it?
It has exploded, and there's certainly a great income tax avoidance migration coming from California.
California in particular.
But the lifestyle here is hard to beat. If you're raising a young family, it's hard to beat. I struggle with the intensity sometimes that you see here versus if you live in Soma in San Francisco or Manhattan in New York. There's just a different level of intensity, but it's certainly something that can be harnessed. And I think that Austin really has the opportunity to create 2 or 3 companies that go somewhere between 10 and 100 billion in market valuation. We had Dell that made it to 100 billion. We have Indeed now, which is probably in the 8 to 10 billion range. We had a few public companies that went private that were in the low billions. But really, other than that, there is not a lot that's passing past 10 is the reality. It's a great place to start a company, but to get them past 10 billion has been harder. I do think the environment has set itself up to start churning those out. And I think those companies that do sort of win that battle are going to win the talent battle as well. We also have a huge number of tech companies here. Oracle has a massive campus. They're going from 4,000 to 10,000 employees. Apple has a massive campus. Google has, Facebook has, but none of them really have a lot of tech talent here. These are sales offices, marketing offices, HR offices. That said, that's just changed. Google announced a new building with 5,000 sort of high-tech engineering workers, and so I think that's going to raise the bar for everyone. And so I'm really excited about navigating the environment that Austin has, figuring out how to get mission culture fit, motivate that lifestyle-oriented workforce to solve big problems, and being able to track not just the top talent in this town, but the talent that wants to move to Austin for all of those reasons.
What does South by Southwest mean for you as a startup here?
Yeah,
we don't have anything like this actually in the Bay Area. If you think about it, we kind of keep talking about how the Bay Area is like this great startup place, and then you have this awesome festival that goes on here every year. But what does it mean for you?
I mean, it's a very binary question for people who live in Austin. You either love it or you hate it. I definitely love it. I definitely love it. I mean, the creative class of the world is all here right now. I mean, every single bit of it. And I saw some interesting panels yesterday on some really complex healthcare topics, CRISPR, and some of these fun conversations. And it was fascinating listening to these scientists describe their most successful advances coming from engineers and scientists who have that creative mindset. And so I think whether you're on the tech and engineering side or the music or on the film side, this is really about the coming together of the creative class. And there's so much conversation about things that happen for good. And so as someone who's based in Austin, having all of these people come here is probably the single best event every single year. Like, you can meet with anyone about anything, and while you can try to make those plans, I think the number one thing that comes out of South by is the serendipity. I think this is probably
us meeting here.
The serendipity that happens when you're at South by is probably the most amazing part. You just have to open yourself up to what could happen, and amazing things do.
So I want to close with a really geeky scientific sci-fi question. When do you think we're going to have implanted copilots?
I think pretty soon. I have a friend who does marketing and PR for a company that's working on a brain implant currently.
A brain implant?
A brain implant. This was the founder of Braintree, the credit card company that sold. He's got a company now where they're working on brain implants, and while on the surface the primary motivations are medical, there's definitely a sort of a gap that can quickly be filled to an app store for your brain. Would you buy a scientific calculator for your brain at the Brain App Store if you could? And then that opens up all kinds of ethical questions, right? So
Oh my God.
do you equip your children with it or not? And, do they have to compete in a workforce or an educational system where some do and some don't? But they're coming and they're not really that far off. I mean, they're actively being worked on right now.
I had one of those conversations with a doctor, and I asked him, where would you implant something that gives you the most information? And he said in our gut, because there's so much information that he felt he could get out of this. I thought that was interesting. So brain implant, gut implant.
Yeah.
With that.
And to that point, I think today one of the most complex sensory environments are our bodies. I mean, for lack of a better way of saying
Absolutely,
it,
yeah.
Who knew that we would be the largest walking hard drives on Earth? Like the amount of data that's being generated from humans is actually quantified to be 10 times all business data. And 45% of that's radiology. But we are generating more data than just about anything out there. And so it's fascinating.
To close, can I invite you on a little drone race?
Yes, let's do some drone racing.
So he has a time to eat.
Ah, come on.
You're making me feel better.
Land it
See?
right side up. There you go.
Wow.
Okay, what time did we do? 46
46.
seconds. Okay.
And when you hit down, what was the drop command?
Oh, I just kept pulling down until it
it's-
landed.
Got it.
So we're gonna launch it for you.
Awesome.
A little bit forward, not too much. Yeah, that's perfect. A little bit more. Stop. Go down a little bit. That's on the right. On the left, sorry, right. Down a little bit. One more. One more. You're gonna beat me. Okay, go a little to the right. Yep. Go through. That's too much, yeah. Hey, look at you. For not as long while you're doing awesome. Through. Up. And back. Oh my God, I'm gonna get embarrassed here. This is awesome. I think I'm down. And just pull it down. Yep, keep going. Nice work. Look how happy he looks.
I'd never done that.
Oh, okay, cool.
That was awesome.
Hey, Joe. Thank you so much for
My
being
pleasure.
here. It was great having you. And with that, we're coming to the end of our Coffee with Mr. IoT. And if you haven't seen any of our previous shows, please check out our YouTube channel. And by the way, somewhere down here, click subscribe. Have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Hey, Joe. Thank you so much for being here.
Y'all have a great day.
No, we're not. There's just an ending to that. One more time.
I'm out of here.
Guys ready to go camping.